Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, a pleasure and an honour to speak with you today. Now, just a little bit of forewarning, a health warning, I should say. The first half of what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit hard to listen to. If you're in distress, small yellow cups will fall from the ceiling and you can have a bit of oxygen, and there's a defibrillator at the front desk if you need that. Food is poised to change more profoundly than in any era of human history. What we eat by 2100, how we produce and consume it, its health value and composition will be as strange to us today as our own ancestors would find the modern diet. In this, the era of cosmopolitan cuisine, cold storage, takeaway, manufactured food, celebrity chefs, and cooking shows. This food revolution will arise out of fierce demand and resource pressures which are building up in the global food system, coupled with the advent of spectacular new technologies and novel trends in farming, health, recycling, and sustainability. Now, today I'm going to make a number of predictions about the future of food based on emerging trends and constraints. Many of these, however, foreshadow magnificent new business, investment, and career opportunities in this, the age of food. Tonight, around 130,000 more people will sit down to dinner than sat down last night. By the 2060s, there's going to be 10 billion mouths to feed. And it's not just a case of babies being born. It's also old folks living longer lives. You know, a person in New Zealand, on average, eats 35,000 more meals than a person living in West Africa. Okay, that gives you an idea how population change is affecting food demand. To meet population growth and economic demand, global food availability has to double by the 2060s. However, everything that we need to do this by traditional means is running out. Soil, water, nutrients, energy, technology, fish, capital, and a stable, reliable climate. And it is this collision between great demands and greater scarcities that make food the challenge of our age. The multiple stress on food security is not well understood by governments or by consumers. Like the Indian blind men in the fable, they are seeing only parts of the beast. And this is what science calls a wicked problem. The world is already at or very close to peak water. In China, India, the United States, the Middle East, and North Africa, groundwater is being mined to grow food faster than it replenishes. A NASA satellite survey revealed that out of the world's 21 great groundwater basins, 13 are already in distress. Rainfall in the Great Grain Bowls is becoming less reliable. Snowpack on the high mountains is shrinking. Lakes, rivers, and aquifers in dry lands are vanishing. Now that's Lake Chad. That's 90% gone in the last 30 years. I mean, you've heard of the Aral Sea, but this is happening worldwide at the moment. Lakes and rivers are drying up everywhere. If nothing changes in how humans manage our most precious resource, by 2030, demand for water will outstrip supply by 40%, according to a United Nations study. The number of people who are facing acute water stress 1 month a year already exceeds 4 billion. The World Economic Forum 2018 World Risks Report rates water crises in the top 5 of the 30 greatest risks facing humanity, along with climate failure, extreme weather, and nuclear war. Demand for water from the megacities and from the energy sector is likely to double, even triple, by mid-century. The World Resources Institute says there's going to be a ferocious struggle for water by 2040, with large areas of the planet drying out. You can see on that map, that's just 2040, that's not far away. There's going to be a belt across the equatorial regions of the world of countries that are very, very short of water, very stressed indeed. Now, the trouble is that when big entities like cities and corporations go for water, the only available water is the farmer's water. The farmer very often loses that fight. Somehow, by 2060, we have to double world food availability, but with only half the water available to do it. As a water-rich country, New Zealand will enjoy a comparative advantage in a water-scarce era, and dairying especially. The art will be to make far more of the resources available, to waste nothing, to recycle everything, to eliminate both contamination and nutrient loss. Eliminate. Indeed, these knowledge-based skills, I put it to you, may become one of the New Zealand dairy industry's greatest exports in future. You are the experts in managing nutrients and water. Whether you wanted to be or not, you have become that. You are now in a position to advise others how to do it. As with water, so with soil. Earth scientists estimate the world is losing 75 billion tonnes of topsoil every year, mostly due to agriculture. The University of Sheffield says we've lost a third of the world's topsoil since 1975. Satellites are showing we're losing about 1% of the world's farming area every year. Okay, this is clearly a one-way street. It cannot continue. There will not be enough land left on the planet that is capable of being farmed if we allow this to go on. You know, we could run out of arable soil within 60 years, as I've seen several scientific papers warning about that. The solution is to change how we produce food and also how we reward farmers. Talk briefly about the modern diet. It's not healthy. In developed countries like New Zealand and Australia, 3/4 of the population now die by their own hand. That is the hand holding the fork. From a range of chronic degenerative diseases, all the diet-related diseases that you can think of, heart, cancer, diabetes, obesity, all of those things is what's taking us down now, and they're all diet-related. The important thing to remember is that food deaths are preventable deaths, and a healthy diet holds the key to preventing disease. Not more drugs, better food. Dairy has always been a leader in the healthy food movement, and the opportunities for this are going to multiply as governments realise they cannot support these health systems propping up people who've caught incurable diseases. Right? We're going to have to change the whole way we do medicine, not just food. Another dimension that we need to think about is that our insatiable hunger is the chief exterminator of the Earth's wildlife in the worst extinction event for 60 million years. Now, you know, we can count people in terms of numbers, but if you measured the human population in terms of their biomass, that is their carbon content or their weight, you would find that 1/3 of the animals living on the surface of the land on this planet are human. And 2/3 of the animals living on the surface of the earth on land are our livestock. And that leaves just 3% of all remaining animals by weight on the planet are wildlife. That's all the elephants, tigers, cheetahs, rhinos, monkeys, birds, lizards, you know, kakapos, whatever. This is why there won't be any wildlife left at the end of this century unless we do something about this. You can see we've taken over such a massive quantity of the Earth's physical activity. E.O. Wilson, who's the world's best-known biologist from Harvard, says basically we're tearing down the biosphere. I don't think the world can sustain this. And the reason, we know the reason. The biosphere is what supports us. It provides the clean air, the clean water that we need to grow food. It provides that beautiful environment, such as you have here in New Zealand. If we don't protect these things, we won't have that kind of environment. We will have a fouled environment, as well as losing all the species that make up those ecosystems. Think about cities for a moment. The cities of today are totally different from all the cities in history in one particular respect. They cannot feed themselves. All their food comes from somewhere else. It comes every night in a river of trucks and ships and planes to restock the shops. Even a hiccup in that chain, and a mighty city of 10, 20, 40 million people will starve within a few days. Okay, they do not grow their own food, these cities. There are disasters waiting to happen. Nobody seems to have noticed this yet, so I'm not quite sure why. But they will do. The solution, the obvious solution, is for cities to grow far more of their own food. And I'll explain why shortly. Now, at the moment, as I'm sure you all know, we are the first generation in the whole of human history to chuck away half our food. Half of the efforts of the world's farmers goes to landfill or down the sewer pipe or somewhere. This is what the typical family, Western family or affluent family, throws in the trash every single month. It's 2 or 3 shopping trolleys worth of good edible food just goes nowhere. This is neither moral, nor economic, nor sustainable. Food today is founded upon a culture of waste. Now you think about what your great-great-great-great-grandparents, how they farmed, they recycled everything back to the soil. That has changed completely in the last 50 to 100 years. Now we waste. Dairying is a world leader in the management of the flow of nutrients onto and off the farm. It will continue to lead as humanity moves towards a new sustainable food system. It will become a primary exporter of know-how and technology in this regard. It can help redesign cities. Yes, the knowledge that you acquire on your farm is what can redesign Auckland, Shanghai, Mumbai, New York. We have to see these cities as things that are cycling vast quantities of nutrients and water. And the issues are the same. World fish catch peaked in 1996, and it's been stagnant or declining for over 20 years. So we're not going to get another 80 million tonnes of fish out of the sea because we need to double the food supply. They're just not there. Visionary solutions are called for, and I will come to those. And as someone who's been reporting on agriculture for nigh on 40 or 50 years, this is something that really appalls me. That's a list there of how the world invests its science dollar. We're putting all that money into pharmaceuticals and IT up the top. Look how much we're putting into food and agriculture down the bottom. It's less than 3 cents in a dollar. We're clearly not bothered about the future of food as a species. We don't understand this as an urgent problem. We are not investing in the future at anything like the rates that we need to invest to secure the food supply. And it takes a long time to turn a piece of science into something you can use on a farm, 20 years or more. So we need to invest early. I'll also point out to you, actually, at the same time as we invest about $50 billion a year in agricultural science and technology. But you know, at the same time we invest $1.8 trillion a year in new weapons. So human beings are a creature that spends more than 30 times more on better ways to kill each other than we do on better ways to feed each other. We need to think about that. If we just took 10% of those military budgets and ploughed them into new knowledge for agriculture and food production, we could change the world dramatically. I call for that. Okay, summing up all the ugly stuff. Basically, every meal you eat, when you go to lunch today, you will eat 10 kilos of topsoil, 800 litres of water, 1.3 litres of oil, 1/3 of a gram of pesticide, 3.5 kilos of CO2. That is what is embodied in every meal for every person on the planet every day. That just cannot be sustained when there are 10 billion people living on a hot, overcrowded planet. It's just not a viable system. We need to start thinking now. You know, we've got 50 years to make these changes, but we need to make them. It has to change. I mean, the first thing is that the Holocene, the stable, benign climate that has applied for the last 9,000 to 12,000 years, in which we founded agriculture, has ended. We are now into a new period of climatic instability. You just have to look at the climate graphs to see that. It's never coming back. We're never going back to that stable environment that we established agriculture in. 2 degrees of global warming are now pretty much unavoidable. Sorry to say that, but we're not going to get there. We're not going to do the Paris thing. What that is going to mean is that outdoor harvests, particularly for grain farmers, are going to become very unreliable. The climate is going to go chop, chop, chop. It'll be drought, flood, flood. Much more intensive, much worse. So you will see countries like India, which have become self-sufficient in the last 20, 30 years, suddenly losing up to 45% of their harvests. Without adaptation, 5 degrees of global warming would halve global food production at the time that we need to double it. So that just gives you an idea of how big the climatic impact is going to be. And obviously it's going to hit livestock through the grains sector most, but it will affect pasture production and things like that. Just to give you an example, US soy and corn yields are forecast to drop by the end of the century between 62 and 83%. Right? Drop. Not even stay level pegging. And obviously that's going to have a huge impact on the price of food for everybody. Everyone on the planet is going to face that. So, you know, when we talk about climate change, it's not just, oh, it's a degree hotter today. It's, why has the food price doubled in my supermarket? That's how it's going to affect people, the cost of food. It's going to drive economics. It's going to drive geopolitics, migration, refugees, wars for the whole of this century if we don't get it right. Okay, the challenge is vast. That's what we've got to do, double food production with a whole lot less resources than we currently have. But, you know, a challenge is an opportunity. There has never been an opportunity for agriculture and food production like this one. Let's explore some of those opportunities. I mean, when we talk about the solutions, the key solution is to recycle all the water and all the nutrients we currently use. Okay? Just not chuck them away. So we've got to be clever in how we think about these things. It's also highly desirable that we eliminate toxins from the food supply for the health reasons that I outlined to you before. We need to transition our diet from one that is unsustainable to one that is sustainable, one that can be kept going generation by generation. We need to take advantage of the spectacular developments in new technology that are taking place. And I believe we need to move half of world food production, that's about 24 million square kilometres, back into the cities. Why? Because the cities are vast catchments of nutrients. Half the world's nutrients flow through the cities and into the ocean. What is the good of that? I think we also have to change the diet. The diet will probably change from this kind of Ice Age European diet of grain and meat to a rather more Asian-style one, more vegetables, more fish, etc., etc. From a diet that is waste-driven to one that reuses water and nutrients. And on this transition, ladies and gentlemen, depends the future of civilization. Worldwide, everywhere I go, smart farmers, smart businesses are already investing ahead of the trend, and here are some examples. The need to feed the megacities is sparking spectacular growth in urban food production. There are 800 million urban farmers at the moment. I reckon that's probably going to double by the mid-century. But the modes raised from high-tech glass skyscrapers producing vegetables, fruits, small livestock and fish, to the large-scale cultivation of fresh foods on urban roofs, that's the Hudson River in New York. They're already farming along the Hudson, as they were a couple of centuries ago. You know, the Swedish tax department is now being designed so that you get food along with your tax. There are some very interesting developments. The world's first vertical forest in Milan has been picked up by Shanghai. Shanghai is not going to be a city full of tombstones like a modern concrete city today. It's going to be a green city. You know, they're going to grow fruit and vegetables and things like that in their buildings. So things are already changing. There's a ferment on. Aquaponic farms are sprouting from Norway, Iceland and Canada to America, France, New Zealand and Australia. In the Japanese Kanto rice bowl, there are already over 200 of these urban farms. In Rotterdam, they're planning a 4,000-acre food park, a vertical park, like a big parking lot, actually. In Stockholm, the Swedes especially are heavily into this sorts of stuff. There's an aeroponic farm in New Jersey producing hundreds of tons of fresh vegetables using LED lighting and things like that. Smart hospitals are planting vegetables on their roofs to feed patients who are in recovery from surgery. Smart restaurants are offering their patrons salad greens harvested 15 minutes ago. In Singapore, I love this one, elderly retirees, doesn't matter what you've been, you might have been a public service or a servant or a banker or a scientist, whatever. In these villages, they become farmers in retirement. They keep fit, they eat healthy, they enjoy the sociable aspects of communal agriculture. You know, it's just a nice way to retire, isn't it? You know, for as long as you're mobile. There are new production paradigms emerging. The architects have discovered agriculture, and we have the birth of a new industry called agritecture, which really is just the manipulation and the management of nutrient and water flows within a building instead of a farm or a city. Elaborate structures like these are already springing up everywhere. That big building on the right is a building in Singapore. Singapore cannot feed itself. It just doesn't have much farming area, so they're putting the farms into the buildings now. In Australia, we've got blue farms on the left. I mean, basically they grow all the little herbs that you see in the plastic packets in the supermarket, but the herbs also grow in large tanks where the barramundi are grown, and the barramundi fertilise the herbs and blah, blah, blah. Don't know whether it's a really economic system, but it seems to work for those guys. In Norway, Miljøgartneret is producing 3,000 tonnes of tomatoes and peppers off 7 hectares. You know, that's a very interesting. I mean, they breed their own bumblebees to pollinate the crop. They breed their own aphids to control, their own wasps to control the aphids. You know, there's no chemicals used in that system. Very high quality produce, top market price. These are the urban systems of the future, and there's just countless different designs. Go on Twitter, look at how many different ideas there are for different ways to farm. But the hallmarks are to recycle the nutrients and the water and the energy where possible. Precision crop feeding. Miljøgartneret, every single tomato plant has got a sensor at the bottom, and it measures what that tomato plant got in the way of nutrients today. They're not just spreading fertiliser on the paddock, ladies and gentlemen. They're actually feeding the plant exactly what it needs, not a penny more, not a penny less. Okay, that's precision agriculture for you. So there's a whole lot of things like that starting to go down. And there's a raft of you know, clever ideas, some of which are crazy, some of which look quite promising, for, you know, doing the, you know, ways to do this, produce things intensively with minimal uses of land, water, energy. How do we minimise those things and maximise food output? Now, land is getting pretty pricey, you know, but there's a solution, and it was invented by the Aztecs 1,000 years ago. You can float your farms, and they did it on reeds, but there are floating farms now being designed for Tokyo Bay, for Singapore, for places where there are big cities. Who knows, Auckland Harbour one day maybe. You know, so there are plenty of ways if real estate becomes too pricey to put farms on it, then we can go to sea. In sheltered areas. And the deserts, so sundrop farms in South Australia are using solar energy, big solar catcher, to actually desalinate salty groundwater to grow crops of tomatoes and grapes for high-priced, you know, top line supermarket stuff, growing the grapes out of season so they get a top dollar and things like that. So yeah, we can farm the deserts. The Middle East doesn't have to go and grab Africa to feed itself. It can actually do this without leaving its own country. And, you know, there are things for even, look, a lot of people in this world miss their connection with the land. You know, this urban civilization we've created, people have lost their connection with food, haven't they? And they mourn for that. And they would like to be farmers. And people like Indira Naidu, who's a famous ABC journalist in Australia, she farms her own balcony, you know. And, but, you know, top two slides on the right are a big German supermarket chain. So supermarkets are farming at industrial scales now, mainly horticulture, but other things as well. You know, if you're a flash cove and you have a $1 million house, you can put an IKEA sphere in your living room and grow all your herbs and spices in your own living room if you want. There's all kinds of ideas, is the point that I'm saying, that from the very small to the very large. To small is beautiful, to giant is profitable. But there are many ways to do this, and there's going to be a lot of demand for knowledge, expertise, technology, how you manage plants and animals. United Nations tells us we've got to eat insects. Well, some people may want to, and some people may not. But, you know, insects are pretty useful at converting all that waste vegetative matter into tucker for trout or chickens. You know, so insects, they've got a role in the cycling of nutrients, even if you don't want to put them in your burger. But some people do, and as diets change, who knows? Now, this one makes farmers a little nervous. It's happening whether we like it or not, you know. Cultured meat is with us, cultured milk is with us. That hamburger cost $350,000, the first one. 2 years later, it cost $11. Okay, so don't let anyone tell you that these things will not be price competitive. I reckon that by the mid-20s to the late 20s, most of the snack foods, the nuggets, the pies, the sausages, will be filled with this sort of meat because it will be a fraction of the price of paddock-reared meat. And it will have a much smaller footprint in terms of water, soil, pesticide, etc., etc. You know, you can't stop the food industry buying cheap, unfortunately. So that means agriculture has to go up market and charge more for a better product, and that will happen too. So this is not actually bad news for agriculture, let me assure you of that, but if I was you, I'd have shares in it, just to be on the safe side. You know, milk or meat that never went moo. And really, when you think about it, a lot of this is just the cultivation of cells. You know, very small livestock or plants, if you like. So biocultures, which is what I'm really talking about. I mean, we've been doing this in agricultural science, growing pasture species and plants and things like that in petri dishes like that for 30 years, 40 years, longer. Now we're growing them in these big silver steel vats called bioreactors. We can produce tons of edible protein and carbohydrate based on plant cells, animal cells, fungal cells, microbial cells, you name it. And the food industry will just add fat, salt, sugar and dye to them as they usually do and make them palatable and then sell them for $5 in a packet of crisps or something. So these things are coming along. Can't ignore them. The food printer is already with us. It's a 3D printer, but you put in, I don't know, you might put in dairy products, and it will print out your pavlova, your meat pie, whatever. They will have those in vending machines, and they will have them in five-star restaurants printing out the latest dessert. Okay, so that's another technology that's going to change the nature of food and what goes on in kitchens. And then when you actually look at our diet, if you went into the biggest market in the world, you would find fewer than 200 different plants on sale there. That's the modern human diet. Okay, but according to a good friend of mine, an agronomist from Tasmania, there are 27,000 edible plants on this planet, okay, that nobody eats except a few indigenous people. So there is a massive, we haven't explored the earth in terms of what is good to eat. We have not begun to explore it. So there's going to be a huge diversification. Many of these things are suitable for the type of intensive production that I've been describing. So there are many, many new things to be adventured in the area of cuisine and agriculture. The key to urban agriculture is producing a food supply that is not going to get hit to leg by climate, by a drought, by a flood, by a chop change type of climate. And a lot of that is going to take place indoors. Sorry, I know it's nice to go out in the paddock in the morning, but a hell of a lot of agriculture, especially crop agriculture, is going to come under cover. It already is. I mean, we've already got acres and acres of it up in Queensland, in Australia, that is undercover. So more and more agriculture is coming indoors because we can't afford those huge, fluctuations in yield that you get from being outdoors. And they're going to become more exaggerated towards the mid-century. Aquaculture. Well, New Zealand's a leader in aquaculture. This is a boom industry already. It's the fastest growing rural industry in the world at the moment. It's taken over a third of the fish market in the world. When you go in the supermarket, all that salmon and all that bassa and other things, they're all farmed these days. And as I mentioned, the oceans are running out of fish. So, inevitably more and more is going to be produced from aquaculture rather than from a wild harvest. But what are we going to feed all these fish on? The challenge is this. FAO says we've got to produce 550 million tonnes of protein to feed the human species in 2050. Right? If you tried to do that today with animals and fed them on corn or wheat or something like that, you would have to discover 3 new North Americas to grow enough wheat and corn to feed those animals and fish and things. Now, obviously, if you go on Google Earth, there are not a lot of undiscovered new continents. Right? So basically the answer is we've got to get the food for the animals from somewhere else. Where? Well, water plants. We know how to grow algae in the ditch where we don't want them. We know how to grow them in the trout streams in New Zealand where we don't want them. But let's face it, algae are phenomenal little beasts. They've been around for 3,000 billion years. They've got all the tricks in the trade. They double their productivity every 24 hours. I mean, I don't know a crop that actually doubles, every 24 hours. They are phenomenally productive. You can take some algae and if you squeeze it, what you get is a whole lot of beautiful vegetable oil, which you can either put on your salad or you can stick it in the back of your Toyota and drive away. And the remainder, the other 50% of carbohydrate and protein, you can feed to your moo cows or yourself. Right, so algae, they're good for human food, they're good for livestock, they're good for transport fuels, you can make plastic, you can make your t-shirt out of them if you want to, You can use them for biomining, right? You can use algae to intercept the nutrients that are running off your farm into the river. So they've got all kinds of useful applications. We're looking at using them in Australia to stop the nutrients that are flowing off the land into the Barrier Reef Lagoon and killing the coral. So there are all sorts of applications for these things. But algae, we can produce megatons of them. In the sea, in big plastic bags, if you like, in coastal bays and inlets, in salt lakes, in deserts. You can grow algae. All you need is sunshine and a few basic nutrients. And you can supply the nutrients from the sewage supply in the city or something like that. So, this is a big farming. This is going to be the biggest cropping industry on the planet by the mid-century, I predict. But agriculture is not going away, ladies and gentlemen. All that's going to happen is it's going to contract to the best, the richest areas. It's going to be able to look after the country better because it's getting a better price. If biocultures are producing cheap food, agriculture can command top dollar, just the way fine wool commands top dollar over ordinary wool. Right? So we're going to see a lot of robots on farms. We're going to see a lot of artificial intelligence planning and managing those farms. We're going to see the robot moving the electric fence, which is rather nice. I wouldn't put too much stress on the robotics aspect, but certainly the farm is going to become much more mechanised than it is today. That, I hope, that little quadricopter there is providing a foliar feed rather than a pesticide. But yeah, you're going to have an agriculture that is managed much more tightly than the one we have at the moment. Ecological agriculture, which I know many dairy farmers already are doing, is going to become the way we farm in the future. So we're going to keep on farming, but just in a more advanced and a more environmentally sensitive way. And on those ridges where you're not grazing and things like that, you're going to put back the forest and put back the kiwis and all the other things that we are in danger of getting rid of. And everywhere I go, there are farmers around the world restoring wildlife. You know, they're putting back the tuck, the Mongolian wild horse that Genghis Khan rode against us. You know, it was extinct 50 years ago, and it's now coming back from a little herd in France. So elephants, you know, all, you know, the wildlife of New Zealand, that precious wildlife that you've got. The best people to manage this are farmers and Indigenous people worldwide. And I think we should be paying farmers and Indigenous people for their stewardship of the planet, for preserving the ecology that keeps us humans alive. It is high time we rewarded farmers for that effort instead of taking it for granted and expecting them to do it for nothing. Right? We have to acknowledge that farmers are keeping our planet habitable. Right? That cattle farmers, for example, especially in pastoral country, will be responsible for drawing down a lot of the carbon that is now going into the atmosphere. So in many ways, farmers are the people who can keep this planet habitable for our grandchildren for generations to come. Terribly important. Finally, look, we can't do this if we've got uninformed, ignorant consumers who eat all the foods that are wrong for themselves, send the wrong signal to the supermarket chain, who send the wrong signal to the food processing company, who send the wrong signal to the farmer who punishes the landscape. Okay, we have to have informed consumers who understand how to eat for health and how to eat for sustainability. So we have a big educational task on our hands. We have to get into the heads of these consumers. We've got Stephanie Alexander in Australia setting up farms in several hundred, 500 schools in Australia, maybe some here, some in America now, you know, where the kids are learning to grow their own food and how to process it, just like your ice cream experiment there. Exactly the same. Kids love doing this stuff. They will eat their Brussels sprouts if they grew them. They won't if they come in a frozen packet from the supermarket. Okay, but we need to teach 10 billion human beings how to eat if we're going to save this planet and if we're going to get the sustainable systems that we need. So finally, what is the opportunity for New Zealand? First of all, you're going to have a much more interesting diet 50, 100 years from now than you've got at the moment, and I don't think it's pretty bloody good at the moment. You're going to have climate-proof systems, and you're going to have systems that reuse all their water and nutrients. You're going to be able to guarantee the food supply for megacities, maybe not just here, but maybe you're providing advice to Shanghai and Mumbai as well. You're going to have diets that keep people out of hospitals. This is going to be a major driver of the ideas economy. I mean, what is between your ears is worth much more than what comes out of your dairy. I have to tell you that. Knowledge is the priceless thing. The world trade in knowledge is worth $6 trillion today. That's a lot more than world trade in food. So get onto the selling of knowledge as well as the selling of dairy, and you've got yourself a winner. And finally, through agriculture, through sustainable ecological agriculture and wise investment, we can reverse the sixth extinction. I mean, basically, how we eat, how we do this, is going to define the future of our civilization now and forever. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.